Alright, I'm back with another video for Rainbow for Web, and in this short video we're going to be talking about input and output, and namely in Rainbow we talk about them using imports and outputs as well as parameters. This is really important because once we start to export from the Max environment into for web, we shouldn't be coming back and forth between those two environments. We should feel solid about the design of Rainbow and being able to run our digital instrument and then putting it into this other abstracted environment for the web. And we're used to maybe using the print box or running some sort of message into the right inlet of a message box and be able to get information of what the state of certain objects or the whole patch might be. It's a little bit harder when we start to use Rainbow for web because of the way that it's structured and how messages are sent in and out of Rainbow. So we're going to talk about using imports and outputs and params. We briefly talked about those last time, and then also we want to talk about why we're doing it in terms of getting state information. If you haven't already, I'm going to link some of these links in the video description. There are some aspects of Rainbow that are definitely different than what we might used to be for Max. Be sure to check those out because some objects might look a little different. Some parameters of those objects might be in different spots, and some of them might be just missing in terms of where we expect them to be. And so take the time to please look at that. The video series is not intended to go through every aspect of Rainbow and then Rainbow for web, but I'm going to try to highlight most of the things that I think are important. One of the biggest aspects that stuck out to me is that symbol messages are not supported in Rainbow. So that means I cannot send just messages with characters or strings and have Rainbow be able to figure out what I'm trying to do or drive a different type of instrument. Namely, you have to use numbers, and it's specifically meant to use floating point numbers. What's an example of this? I'm going to go into my patch that we're working on, and if I create a message box right in this center area, you can see it here. Sometimes we might have a message that says something like start machine, something like this, and this normally is going to be just fine in Max. When I do that, it auto corrects it to 0, and let's see, let me try that one again. Let's say start machine, and we'll see what Rainbow thinks about that. It says bad number. Why is this? Because Rainbow doesn't understand symbols. In this case, the start machine is a symbol, and they want to, according to the documentation, it says one of the most significant differences between Max and Rainbow is that it only allows numerical values in messages. So only numerical values. We're sending in numerical values and we're sending out numerical values. And in terms of how we're sending that information between the patch, the Rainbow patch, and the environment. In this case, we're still in Max, and I have these attributes and parameters set up right here, but the information that's coming in is only numbers, and I can't just send in just words into the environment. This is the same case when I take this patcher and I put it into the web environment too, so we need to keep that in mind. So some questions might be, is my patch running? What state is it right now? Is it in start? Is it in a different phase? Maybe you're thinking about your instrument in different sorts of phases, or maybe you want to go between different types of instruments. How do we get that information represented in numbers? We'll talk about that today too. Okay, so let's dive into it. Let me fix my mic. Okay, and there's a couple things that I adjusted from the patch. So I have a link to this patch as I'm starting it right now. You can download it from my Dropbox, and it should look something like this. Some things that are different than last time is we had this multi-slider object, and one thing I added that I thought would be interesting in terms of setting the resolution for these options. Before, if we had a multi-slider object, these sliders can have nearly continuous values, and I thought it would be neat if we could constrain some of those values so that it's automatically segmented or more narrowly resolved. So what I ended up doing was I used two objects, the round object with a parameter of 0.1. We'll talk about the 0.1 in a moment. And then that output is going to be sent to a prepend set list. And this allows me to send multiple values and then put it back into multi-slider, which accepts lists. And so I'm setting the values with this set list. Just a preview of what is coming out of the round object is something like this. And you can see that it's taking these values and it is rounding them to the nearest 10th place, point dot value. So if I were to set this to round 5.5, then when I select this, it's either going to be 0, 0.5, or 1. And this can be neat. We can hear what it sounds like in a moment. Why am I changing that? I want to change this one here. So I'm going to change this back to 0.1. And so you can see all these values now that are going into Rainbow are going to be rounded to the nearest 10th. It can be the same thing over here. You can change it however you want. Let's have a little preview of what that might sound like. I'm going to get rid of this object. And I will make sure that this transport is turned on. Slide this up. Let's see, can we hear anything? Tempo is 40. Oh, I might have turned off. There we go. If I were to adjust this to 0.05, may not be able to hear the differences depending on what we're doing downstream, because inside the patch we have a scale object. Let me zoom back out to here. When we're looking at this, we're taking that information and we're scaling it between 0 and 1, and we're mapping it to 12, 13 semitones. And we are constraining the interface if we use this round. And this could be a way to set some scales if you want to, or just to limit the variation if you want. So feel free to add these two objects, the round and the prepend set list, back into your multi-sliders. Another thing that I added between the last video is I forgot to add this at lock 1 in my phaser, and if I don't have this attribute on my phaser, then it's not linked to the transport that I have over here. So if I were to turn this on and off, then this phaser wouldn't be firing according to the transport. And so since I didn't have it before, when I went to toggle this on and off, the phaser wasn't ramping, and then it didn't go downstream through the what tilde object. So make sure that we add this at lock and have a value of 1 there, so that when we turn off the transport and turn it back on, it is making the phaser run. You can see that when I click on this toggle over here, that the snapshot is not advancing. When I turn it back on, then it is advancing. Great, so those are the two patching differences that we had from last time, and you should be caught up now, especially if you're using the patch from the Dropbox that I'm linking as well. Okay, so last time we had these objects. I'm going towards the top of my patch here. We had these import object and param, and I said that we we're going to talk about them, and today we are going to be talking about them. Import is sort of like what we expect in regular Max when we have some sort of inlet and we can send some information to something else. It operates really similarly. What's interesting about this is when we abstract this to our web interface, we can imagine that there's this Rainbow patcher, and if we assign things like imports or params, those are the tunnels or ways to get into the patch. We can use outports and params also to get information out of our patch. I had a little illustration right here. So our embedded rainbow patcher, it goes on the website or our mobile phone app, and we need to have ways to go in and we need to have ways to go out. And sometimes those out information is the audio that we hear. Sometimes it's letting us know that the patch is in a certain stage. Or maybe if we want to say that something is not working or the toggle isn't on, we want to double check the tempo or the number of beats that we have. We might want to route things out of our patcher so that we can see it on our interface. And then also when we want to, I said interface, I want to say interface. When we control this patch on our website or on the phone, we need to have ways to get that information in, kind of like what we do over here. So a lot of these things that we see over here are going to be translated analogously via web interfaces, devices, or elements to be able to change values or use a multi-slider that we're going to create on ourselves, a single slider to control the volume, those sorts of things. And you can sort of imagine it's not going to look exactly like this. This is a typical Max patch, and we might do something like do some sort of presentation mode. And I did a mock-up of what I might think it could look like when we're finished on the phone version when we get to it. And so I did a version that looks kind of like the multi-slider over here. We'll have volume control for the gains of each individual instrument, a start and stop of the transport, and then the tempo that we want to set it. There might be other things that we want to have on there. We might maybe have some messages to say that this thing is started. And eventually, if we have different digital instruments that we create, we want to let us know which one we're actually using. So right now we have sequencer, we could be something else. In the end, we need to set up these inputs and outputs to be able to send that information out. So let's dive again into this. When we're finished with this, we're not going to use all of these sorts of things. The documentation for Rainbow is pretty thorough about how you might go about it. Both of these routes are going to be really useful. So let's sort of dive into it. Imports allow us to name this import. So we call this beats. Eventually in our JavaScript, we're going to be able to address beats and send a value into that beat. So if we go over here, the example that I have in this sending and receiving messages is we can define the destination or the name of the import that we want to be sending information to, and then we can send it an array of values and then schedule it to be sent over into that specific one. So in this case, we would rename dest to beats. It's simple in that sort of way. Another thing that we can do is that if we want to get information out of our patch, then we could create an out port, and this could be something like rainbow info. And we want to make sure that we name everything with all one string. We don't want spaces between the names of things. And capitalization is going to matter when we get down to it when we write the JavaScript. And so we want to make sure that we remember how we name these sorts of things. And so I have this out port called rainbow info. And let's just say that we want to just mirror what comes in from our import track 1. So it'll automatically be sent out when we send something in. We can access this in Max like this. And if I hover over here, you can see that this is this is port messages outlet. Once I send this thing, I'll make it go all like high-ish numbers. You can see that this rainbow info, that's the name of the out port that I created, and that's the value that is the values of those sliders, multi-sliders that we just sent in. So this sort of information will be accessible to us in the JavaScript, and we can use that to know what our state is, or just to double check or debug that we're actually sending slider values into our patcher and it's coming and it might be processing that, right? Because it's going to be hard to see whether it's working or not without that sort of outlet, because it's sort of abstracted and obscured for us when we export it. So it'll be useful for us to get those sorts of things. I think that that's going to be a critical thing that we want. Let's change this output name to be track 1 values. And we're going to do the same thing over here to the other one, because once we start testing our instrument on the web, we want to make sure that those values are actually coming in. So I'm going to duplicate that one, drag this into our import over here. And I'm just going to make sure that it says this other one is track 2 values. Hit save. We'll come back over here and let's just double check that. So I'm going to just wiggle some of these sliders on the rhythm part, and you can see that this has track 2 values and has those values. So when we export this, we expect to be able to look by name, track 1 values, track 2 values, and be able to receive, based on that tag, the information that comes out of it. So we are going to copy this bit of code and put it into our JavaScript the next video. And we're going to do something similar to be able to send in values as well on this end. Cool. I think that's basically it for this video. It's a really short one. We'll come back and do some more with finally getting it into the web environment, because this basically works, and it works pretty well. One other thing that we might add is, do we want to add any other outports to our patch to be able to see the state? Again, this is important that it's not able to send out messages. It would be really great to maybe say like, we can't do like the hello world sort of thing, because as soon as we write this, Rainbow is going to be upset and say, no, that's not a number. We need to have things in a form of numbers. So there is a level of non-obviousness when we start to get things out, and so we will have to maybe take notes if we want to translate numbers into something meaningful to us to be able to debug things. But for right now, I think that this is going to work well. I'll see you again in the next video.